Today is January 21st, 2026. It is 5:17 p.m. and I am going to see how many video games I can beat in 1 year. So starting the challenge today and ending at, I will just say 5 p.m., January 21st, 2027. Because I don't want to wait until January 1st, 2027 to start it on New Year's. Because that would be stupid. I'm going to start with Kirby's Avalanche because this is a very short game that I know I can beat pretty easily. A lot of these type of puzzle games tend to be pretty short at least. And with Kirby's Avalanche, you can start on level 4 if you want. You can't do that in Mean Bean Machine. But I think that's because this game doesn't have a save feature or a password system like Mean Bean Machine does. I'm actually not playing very well. Because I don't know how to play Puyo that well. But I can at least beat Puyo games, some of them. Mean Bean Machine on Genesis is actually very difficult compared to this game and the Game Gear version and some of the other Puyo games. But yeah, I've had this idea to see how many games I can beat for a long time. And I'm finally just gonna try and actually do it. I misdropped that. I'm already losing though. Okay. I'll try and play better. I wasn't really paying attention. I think a lot of these puzzle games kind of tend to be just... You can kind of brute force it in a way. Again, Mean Bean Machine on Genesis can be pretty tricky. I think, from what I remember, Puyo Pop Fever on Game Boy Advance is like way too difficult for no reason. But Mean Bean Machine on Game Gear, I think, should be fine. And then it'll just be about seeing what other types of these games and how difficult or easy they are. There's definitely a lot to consider with doing something like this. And, you know, what counts as a satisfactory definition of even beating a game? Because there are many different ways you can argue for different games. I know Backloggery, one of their definitions was to see the credits of the game. And in a way, that can be a pretty easy definition, but I think a definition of beating a game kind of has to be more per game. Because seeing the credits can be satisfactory for if there's a game that doesn't necessarily have a defined ending, you know, you don't beat a final boss or anything. So that would mean a game like Pac-Man World Rally. There is a satisfactory ending to the game because you get the credits when you beat every cup. So you would be able to do that even though there's technically no final boss in that game, or like actual ending cutscene or anything. But then that definition gets a little trickier when you get to a game like Kirby Superstar, or Superstar Ultra specifically. I don't know if it's the same in the original Superstar. But in Superstar Ultra, you get credits after you beat each game mode. So you get credits after beating Spring Breeze, but would you say you've beaten Superstar Ultra if you've only beaten Spring Breeze? And you'd never played Dynablade or Revenge of Meta Knight or Meta Nightmare Ultra or Revenge of the King or Milky Way Wishes even? So I think you have to kind of go per game and see what's a satisfying conclusion for this game. What seems like you beat the game. And I'm honestly going to go... I didn't start the timer. I spent so long messing with the timer just to not start it. But I think you have to go per game. And I'm just going to go with what I think feels right for each game. Because you could probably argue a lot of different ways as a definition for beating a certain game. Because you could maybe even argue that beating Superstar Ultra would just be beating Milky Way Wishes, because that's kind of the main story. I've always felt like beating Superstar Ultra, though, is kind of just beating the true arena, because that's the last game mode you unlock. And it's kind of the ending to the gameplay, at least. So that would probably be my definition for that. And then some games, honestly, you just can't beat, and that's just gonna have to be fine. Because I wouldn't say you can beat the original Pac-Man. It was made to be an infinite game. Sure, there's a limit to how many cutscenes play, there's a limit to how many levels you can actually play, but I don't think there's any point in the original Pac-Man that was any sort of intentional, this is the end of the game. I think it was meant to be, you play it forever. Or until you game over, at least. And then other than that, a lot of this is going to be just figuring out what are the shortest games. And how long is it going to take me to beat them, and how many can I do at a time? Obviously, life's going to get in the way at some point. I'm not going to be able to just do this 24/7. But I can go for as long as I can on each day and just see what's possible. Definitely are quite a few short games out there. There's definitely some really short ones too. But when I've exhausted all the really short ones, then what? What games can I find after that? I can definitely, though, tell that I've not played this game in quite a while. Or any Puyo Puyo, really, because I am just not playing very well. I've beaten this game many times, though. This is probably my most beaten Puyo game. More than Mean Bean Machine, even though I've played Mean Bean Machine. I've had Mean Bean Machine longer. Definitely not good to already be losing this early, but the later levels get faster, and there's no... You can't game over in this game. So you can just try it as many times as you want, as long as you, obviously don't switch off the console. Because, again, there's no password system in this game. Difficulty, though, definitely does play a part in this as well. If a game is super difficult, then even if it is really short, then can I even beat it? Because there are some tricky games that are technically short games. Like if I were to do, say, I don't know that I can beat like the original Super Mario Brothers. You know, especially with getting a game over and having to restart. I just don't know if that's gonna be viable for me. And then puzzle games like this will depend on difficulty as well. I think I can do this one. I think I can do some of the other Puyo Puyo games. I can probably do Puyo Pop at least on a Game Boy Advance. Not Puyo Pop Fever, but the original Puyo Pop. I can probably do Tetris Attack as well. I feel like Tetris Attack is pretty easy. And then I guess I would need to see how I feel about a definition for some of the other, like, these types of puzzle games. If they have a story mode, that's pretty easy to define. But if they don't have a story mode, then what's the next best definition, if there is one? So like in Tetris DX, there's 40 lines mode. If you can just do 40 lines mode and that's a satisfactory definition, I mean, that's pretty easy because you just make 40 lines. And then Kirby Star Stacker is another one that should be really quick and easy. Well, okay, it's easy, but I don't know that it's actually necessarily that quick. The hardest difficulty takes like 4 hours to beat, and that's on top of the hour to do all the other difficulties, so that's like a 5-hour game. And right now I'm really looking at kind of doing like 1 to 2 hour games. At least to start with. Eventually I'll probably have to do a lot of much longer games. But there are quite a few 1 to 2 hour games I can easily think of off the top of my head that would be very short, very easy to do. And obviously, familiarity becomes a big part of what games are viable. Because some games, if you're not familiar with it, they might take quite a bit. But if you already know, especially like a puzzle game, if you already know all the solutions to the puzzle, then it's not going to be that hard. But if you don't know the solutions, well, then it might take a bit to figure it out. That's why I think one game that's going to be super quick for me to do is going to be Metal Gear Solid 2. If I'd never played Metal Gear Solid 2 before, I probably wouldn't think at all to do that game, but if you don't watch any of the cutscenes, and you just kind of go through each objective, especially if you use the M9, and you already know where to go, what to do, where all the bombs are, and everything like that. Metal Gear Solid 2 is a pretty short and easy game, honestly. But that is just because I'm super familiar with it. Now, I probably wouldn't do Metal Gear Solid 3, because I'm not nearly as familiar with Solid 3 as I am Solid 2. Solid 2 and Phantom Pain, Ground Zeroes are probably the only two, like, super easy. If I could drop this piece where I want it to go, probably the only two short enough Metal Gear games I could do. If I was more familiar with some of them, others might be viable. But yeah, this tends to be the strat for Puyo Puyo. Fail upwards. Stack randomly until... Well, I mean, obviously it's not the strat. There are actual strats to this game, but if you're not very good at the game, the strat is just fail upwards. Stack randomly until you accidentally clear one thing that just clears a bunch of other things, and you get like 10 red rocks. But if I was more familiar with a lot of Metal Gear games, maybe some of those could be more viable. And maybe Solid 3 could be viable. I know Solid 3 well enough that I could probably beat it. Like, I could beat it fairly easily, right? It's not that I wouldn't be able to beat the game. The question at that point isn't really, can I beat it? The question is, how long will it take to beat it? Because if it's going to be a few hours, or if it's going to be more than a few hours, then I may not want to do that, but if I could beat it in only a couple hours, then maybe. But I have the most confidence with Metal Gear Solid 2 as a Metal Gear game I can do. And then that's also the Punch-Out games. If you were a first time playing many of the Punch-Out games, it's probably not all that easy to just come in and beat it super quickly. But if you know how to beat each fight, then Punch-Out's not that big of a problem, especially if you're super familiar with a lot of the fights. Because... I misdropped there. If I could have taken out that green. But I mean, this is already pretty close to the end of the game. It's just Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright, Kracko, Meta Knight, and DDD, I think. Honestly, I don't remember how it is for Kirby's Avalanche. I know in Mean Bean Machine, though, at least the Genesis version, I actually think it's the second to final level that's the hardest. I think Scratch is way harder than Robotnik. But yeah, Punch-Out's definitely one I'm gonna do. At least, I don't know if I can do NES Punch-Out, but I can for sure do Punch-Out Wii and Super Punch-Out. Well, Super Punch-Out might take a bit. I'm not quite as familiar with Super Punch-Out as I am Punch-Out Wii. I mean, I'm very familiar with the game, but I've got Punch-Out Wii on lock. Like, for Punch-Out Wii, as long as I can beat Soda Popinski pretty quickly, then that will be no problem. It might take me a couple tries to do Soda Popinski, because that is the hardest fight in the game, in my opinion. Because once you know how to do it, I'll be real, Bald Bull, not a challenge. Bald Bull title defense is really not a challenge when you know how to deal with Bald Bull. Bald Bull is the noob trap, but as far as actually what's tricky, when even if you know what you're doing, Soda Popinski is way harder. And even I would say Mr. Sandman's harder. I guess Mr. Sandman's not that bad, but I guess the thing that's always made Mr. Sandman kind of hard for me is it kind of just depends on like not making too many mistakes. You know, if you make a few mistakes in a row on Bald Bull, that's a little forgiving because he doesn't attack quite as fast as Mr. Sandman. If you get stuck to where you're just making mistake after mistake after mistake in Mr. Sandman, the challenge can get really difficult really fast. And then I wouldn't even have to worry about Donkey Kong, because unless I get him in Max Last Stand, I wouldn't even face Donkey Kong. And even if I did face Donkey Kong, you don't have to beat him, because you don't have to beat any of the fights in Max Last Stand. You just lose on purpose to beat the game. But yeah, this is kind of the noob experience for Puyo Puyo. If you're not very good at the game, this is kind of just how you beat the game. You just keep playing the levels over and over until you eventually win. Some of it, though, is... I don't know if it's just this version of the game, or if it's the controller I'm using, or if I'm just bad, but there are definitely times where I'm like mashing to one side and then it just does not drop the piece to that side, and it just kind of goes in the middle, especially when it gets a bit faster. But still, sometimes it can be just like, it's mostly RNG, really. Like, if you were really good at the game, you could beat any of these levels instantly. But for not being good at the game, yeah, it wouldn't let me rotate there. For not being good at the game, it kind of just does come down to RNG. Sometimes they'll just get combo after combo after combo, and then there's nothing you can do. Sometimes you don't even have to get combos, and then they'll just kind of kill themselves. I mean, that's literally what happened with Mr. Shine and Mr. Bright earlier. I did nothing to really force a win in that. I was like building stuff up to try and win, but I didn't even need anything at that point. And sometimes you get to the point where you make a match and you wonder, what was even my plan with that? Then no way it was gonna help. I hate it when you get... Well, I mean, I guess it helped because I won, but when you get the 3... Or when you get multiple moves, that's not a combo. They just all go away at the same time. That doesn't do as much as a combo does, so... Oh, I forgot this game doesn't... Okay, I was thinking this was one of the games that did do it, but... There's like slight differences between a lot of the Puyo Puyo games, especially this early instance where they were not calling them Puyo Puyo, they were localizing them differently. In some versions, making a single match will give one rock to the enemy. And in other games, a single match does nothing. You have to get a combo. I was thinking this game was one where a single rock appears if you do get a single match. But I guess that's not correct, because it didn't happen. I guess that must be... That must be Mean Bean Machine on the Genesis that does that. And I know later in the series, they also change it to where if you have damage incoming, and you get a combo, it'll negate that damage that you were about to get. But a lot of these early Puyo Puyos don't do that. So if you have too much damage where you're guaranteed going to lose, and then they get more... and then you do matches, it doesn't matter because you're going to lose either way. Because you already have too much damage. Whereas in later games, you could maybe offset that damage and then not take as much to kind of avoid that. And then Puyo Pop Fever just has this stupid fever mechanic that I think hurts every player except the noobs and the pros. That's been a while. I might revisit Puyo Pop Fever and see what that's like. Because there are so many Puyo Puyo games, dude. How many Puyo Puyo games can I do that's just kind of the same thing, but you just play a different version of the game? Because I know, in terms of games I've beaten before and feel pretty confident in my ability to do over and over, this one, Puyo Pop on the Game Boy Advance, and Mean Bean Machine on the Game Gear, I'm pretty confident with. Mean Bean Machine on Genesis, I don't know, the last time I tried to play that game, it was fairly difficult. And I honestly was not sure if I'd be able to beat it. I was getting stuck super early in the game, too. Which is weird, because I've lost, you know, a few matches here, like, a few times. But I was, like, getting, like, actually stuck on some of the levels. To be fair, though, could be more mid-game, since they get a lot faster in these later levels, and, like, DDD's just instantly dropping. If he's not making enough combos, then he's gonna just build himself up till he loses. So it could be maybe just the middle's a bit more brutal in Mean Bean Machine than this game. But yeah. That is the end of Kirby's Avalanche. More than 20 minutes, though. I'll go ahead and stop that timer. More than 22 minutes for sure, because I forgot to start the timer in the first 2 levels. But, yeah, that is game number 1 completed. So I've still got... And since I'm going back to 5, that means it's only been 44 minutes since I started the challenge, and that's already 1 game complete. I've got a lot of other really short games, and so I think this will start getting really interesting when we get to where there are just... I'm out of the ideas I had already had. But yeah, I'll decide what the next game is, and we will go from there.